And so for the session, we have two wonderful writer and artists. I mean, they're both individually writer and artists themselves. And we will have them here share some of their work and talk to us about the subject. The session is going to be moderated by Venita. A lot of us know Venita. A short description into Orjit and Amruta, while we know them, and I believe Venita is going to go into details. But Orjit has been one of the very first practitioners of graphic novel, that format in our country. And yesterday we had a great session where he learned about his experience on the new Power Collective, and we discussed that collection of stories, which is again a graphic novel that has been brought about recently. The book is available, and I think a lot of us have had a chance to peek into it. In today's session, specifically, Orijit is going to talk. We are going to dwell on his first graphic novel, which is River of Stories, written and illustrated by him. It is regarded as one of the first Indian graphic novels, and it tells the story of the environmental, social, and political issues surrounding the construction of the controversial Narmada Dam. And we would also have with us Amruta Patil. Amruta Patil has been a writer and illustrator in Goa, and some of her recent works have been Adi Parva. That's a book that is based on Mahabharata and has been released at this very festival. Very promising work has already received a lot of good reviews, and the book is available. Amruta also started with her first graphic novel Kali, which came about a couple of years ago, and I would request Venita to please take forward the session. May I invite Amruta? Would you first introduce them?
Since we've got so many people, maybe you all could all come a little bit closer and we could do this as a very informal, chatty session, rather than us all having to use mics. That would really be nice. So, I thought before we got into the theory of activism versus being an artist, we just let the work speak for itself. So both Amruta and Orijit have for us tiny slide presentations, so that you can actually see the work that they're going to be talking about. So let's begin with that. Here's Amruta, and she's going to give us a small little presentation.
I need to disclaimer this because first thing, Orijit has a special place in my development as a graphic novelist because he was the person in whose house I saw probably the first graphic novel that I've ever seen in my life, and I was probably 16 years old or so at that time.
Which
so,
one?
I think it was by the Hernandez
brothers. This was one to make sure.
I think it was entirely inappropriate in many ways, but that's where I first learned of this medium. So he's special in that sense. Also, I kind of find it odd to be on the same activist kind of panel with him, simply because we are in different positions vis-a-vis these things. My presentation is much more personal right now to tell you about why I chose to start trying to make work which was not what Kari was. Okay, so in that sense, basically Kari, have most of you here seen Kari or read Kari?
Yeah.
Okay, so we know that it's very personal, it's very intimate, it's a first person, young person coming to terms with the world kind of a story. It had no agenda. I knew nothing about the publishing world or much about what I was doing. It was very, very spontaneous in that sense. If it had some politic to it, it happened to be there, not because I intended it to be there in any way. Gaze was internal, as a lot of young people's work tends to be, which is not a bad thing. But I think at some point, and I turned 30, which happens to us if we don't drop down dead at 39. Basically, that I need to make a choice about what kind of work I wanted to be doing there onwards. There was a niche that a lot of these young kids that were reading my work, did I want to keep writing work because I had developed a certain sort of a house style, or whether I wanted to move beyond. And it felt like, for me personally as an individual, I needed to do something that was a little less nominalistic and a little less preoccupied with myself, which is not a bad thing. But, so Kari. Again, a tale about about a girl who happens to have been in love with another woman. It's not a coming out kind of a book. It's a book that's what she is, and it's very matter of fact. Gaze is continuously observing, empathetic, concerned about the world, but still oneself is the solar presence in the story. After that, after Kari, I started reading a lot of mythology and I started reading a lot of history because I felt that both these things engage with the world in very different ways. And I didn't think that they were that disconnected from each other either. One of the symbols that felt like when I was reading myth, one of the things that one ends up reading is about the tarot, and the archetypes that are present in the tarot. I was very, very intrigued by the card of the Fool, which is the first card in the arcana of the tarot. And basically the tarot's major arcana can be seen as the journey of this bumbling little fool. Fool has set out, I need to go and see the world, doesn't know his ass from his elbow, is like bouncing around, not looking down below, and therefore on the ledge and about to step off. So I possibly identified with the character, and I know that the end card of the arcana is the card of the world, in which there's this dancing, it's a hermaphrodite, but you can't see it. The card is actually a hermaphrodite card of a dancing person, which a fool is not. So hopefully one will get there, and I see that my own journey is the journey of the fool, and hopefully one will get to a slightly more dancing place instead of 6 left feet. What I tried to do post-Kari, when I was researching for Parva, is also evolve some kind of a worldview, non-existent. I barely read the papers. Even now I find myself miserably ignorant about most things. But I was trying to process the world and have some of that reflect in the work that was happening. So this is the first thing that marked that change. It is called the topography of the fool's journey, and it talks about basically the aspiration to at least move past bundle in hand towards the world card. During this time, again, the scope is not ambitious. I'm talking about what is close to home. Desire to start growing things, but I don't know how to plant, don't know the first thing about gardening. There was something happening with the domestic help. Her child ended up being pregnant at 15, and there was a whole lot of drama that went with that. So the next piece of work addressed that. Not necessarily as in my menstrual cycle, my dog, and my bad day kind of way, but hopefully distilling something of real world experiences and speaking in a language that is a little more universal than just this happened to me today and 9 a.m. this happened at 10:30 that happened. This piece was extraordinarily difficult for me. It is about basically sedition when the whole Vinayak Sen thing was going on. And you have to realize this is very hard work for me. I don't have a political bone inherently in my body, and also have a brain like a sieve. So for me to distill any kind of a view which talks about important matters is hard work. So this came out in Himal magazine as well as in Internazionale magazine in Italy. It's about disaffection. Again, I'm playing with styles, playing with text, and each of these you'll see that they're being used in different proportions. I was chucked out of my house by a landlady, and this broke my heart. But I felt that rather than whining about it and just like sitting and holding a grouse, I should turn it into a piece that addressed the issue of single women, odd women living in middle class areas who are viewed at with a certain filter. So this is another piece on being evicted, but again, hopefully not just from a me, poor me way, but in a way that talked about the issue. This was a small piece about basically freedom of speech, which had appeared, I think, I'm not sure what it appeared in, DNA or something like that. It was called Liberal Light. All of these pieces are there on my blog. I didn't want to show work from Parva or Kari because this is really the work that is more concerned with the planet other than planet me. This is a piece called Atlantis, which appeared in Forbes Life magazine. It is about the issue of how we build concrete beehives and the reality of being mammals that were supposed to live close to the ground who are now living suspended on 35th floor, and what that really does to us. This is about the issue of nutrition and food and what it means to eat, and not just talking about food as in nutrition that is on our plate, but also stuff that we ingest in other ways in our bodies. This was about the business of freedom, basically what it means. It came out on Independence Day, and it took the viewpoint of one girl called Aditi, who is in art school and has been asked to write the motivational speech for a flag hoisting ceremony for which there are going to be 5 people, most of whom are there because there are pakoras available and they live in a hostel, so that's incentive. So this addresses that, and hopefully it takes a personal viewpoint but picks up a few things that are not quite that simplistic. Unblinking Hive was again about, as something happened, I've lived alone a lot, and then I got married, and then I got not married. And I suddenly started getting a lot of understanding of the way society viewed a person that was living alone. Like the moral policing, like when you're younger, you have the benefit of doubt, abhi choti hai, theek hai, 5 saal mein shaadi ho jayegi. Suddenly you're 33 and people are wondering what's up. If you're so good, if you're so cool, why the hell are you alone? And you know, there's a whole lot of processing of your person that happens, and a lot of work recently has been assessing that, and also the thing that women here face, not necessarily in so anyhow. So that has been the outward gaze that I have been trying to actively keep with myself, because it doesn't come naturally to me. And I feel that I owe it to myself to not use my time merely to indulge myself work-wise. And hopefully it will be useful to the rest of the world. Adiparva, just one slide to show you. It is in essence, Adiparva is a myth. It is based on the Mahabharata. But what I realized about 8 years into my reading of the Mahabharata was that almost everything that the story talks about is actually on one level a psychological reading of what should be or could be happening within you. So the Asuric urge is yours, the Deva urge is also yours. At times you're the Apsara that is breaking the distraction, at times you're the hermit that needs to put the wall down and not squander your tapas. So it is very much to be read on that level, apart from all the other fun levels about kings and queens and battles and such. Diana Egg, the historian, and I've mentioned this in the foreword of the book, she called it organic ontology. Basically, viewing the universe using the human body as a schema to understanding what is happening in the larger thing. So, in a sense, that is what I'm trying to do with all the other work that went before. I'm not a genius grade mind, so I do what I can with smaller, intimate experiences and hopefully learning something on the way and maybe useful to other people that are on a similar curve. That's all. So, thank you very much.
I find it really fascinating that Amruta is writing a presentation in word gaze, not word gaze. Because just 15 minutes ago, while Orijit and I were talking about an artist and what is necessary for an artist to live in the world, that's exactly what we discussed, inward gaze and outward gaze. So Orijit will present a little bit of his work, and then we shall chat.
The fastest showing of great model work was a little too fast.
We can revisit if there's anything particular.
Yeah, as we check.
Hi. Okay, since we were talking about the river stories,
Can everyone hear?
Why don't you guys just come closer, all of you on the back? Bring your chairs and come a little closer and solve everyone's problem. Just because I hate mics, they tend to make a discussion.
Yeah, it's very soft spoken, so maybe we should. Is this
All
one?
of us can't squeeze into the front row.
there's space here.
This is working,
No,
Orjit.
everybody.
Okay. So this is a few images from the River of Stories, which I worked on between 1991 and 94. This came out in 94. So it was about my engagement with the Narmada Bachao Andolan and the kind of a critique of the present development model which the Andolan was trying to put forward. I was very much an active participant in that Andolan, and so to an extent it's not, some people have said that it's a work of reportage. Not really, because it was not so-called whatever that objective view is. I was concerned with putting across the point of view of the Andolan, the critique of the development model, and I wove together the creation myth of the tribal community, the Bilala Adivasi community that lived in that region, who were being displaced by the dam project. And interestingly, the creation myth centers around the river. Their whole sort of world and universe, the river runs through the center of that universe, and their explanation of the universe. and to me that that really kind of brought home how wrong a model is, which looks at the river just as a means of harnessing electricity for development purpose, and doesn't realize or doesn't care about the much deeper connection that people who have lived with that river for centuries have. And so I wove together the myth of the Bilalas along with a thinly fictionalized version of what was going on with the development project. So these parts in the beginning are, it starts with the creation myth, and with the with the storyteller Magbu Gayan narrating the myth. And then in a different graphic style, we move into the story of this young reporter Vishnu, who goes to the goes to cover this movement in this river called Reva, which is actually an old name for the Narmada, which is a local name for the Narmada. So it was that thing. I mean, anybody wanted to make the connection couldn't help, but I mean, most people would have made the connection, and yet I like the idea of staying on that line between fact and fiction, where exactly why I was saying that I didn't want it to be seen as reportage. I was not talking about something as from an objective point of view, but so in that sense, I prefer to use the format of fiction to tell the story. Okay, these are just a few pages to. Yeah, I know. It's running through these is not much fun, but otherwise then it will become too much to show.
You can use the mouse.
This is a more recent work, which is still in process. Actually, I haven't completed it. But this is inspired by the events of the tsunami and the nuclear disaster that happened in Japan. And I had read Matsuo Basho's The Narrow Road to the Deep North, a Zen poet who traveled. It was a travelogue by him in the 16th century. He traveled actually to the places which have been devastated by the nuclear meltdown in Fukushima. And I kind of started seeing Basho's poetry and his deep respect for the spirit. I think it's the same thing with the Bilala myth as well. I think with poetry, with mythology, we connect to something much deeper than the physical. And our development model and the way we live our lives, the way we look at things is all about resources, its value, its economic worth. We judge whether it's okay to cut down a tree or not based on whether it is economically viable to do so or not, and it's a completely different worldview. And to me, trying to juxtapose these different views, so I have this poetry of Basho and Basho's travels and his sense of the description of the spaces where he traveled, kind of colliding with images of the nuclear meltdown, and his poetry appears into the landscape, into the everyday lives of people, and finally he kind of enters into the space where of Fukushima, where all these guys at the bottom are, those radiation suits and stuff. And then the story kind of moves from Fukushima, and Basho walks away and slowly ends up joining another movement which is happening in Jaitapur right now, and it sort of ends with these questions about nuclear and energy, solar, what it means. Interestingly, the peace sign is first came about as a symbol for the campaign against nuclear disarmament, and that's what and these, I don't know if you can see these paper cranes. There's a story about this girl who who was dying of cancer from nuclear radiation, who made 1,000 paper cranes because she believed that she would be immortal if she could do that. And so it's a reference to that, and the idea of the kind of development and the kind of the cost that we pay to sort of live the lives that we do right now, and it was a question on that. Okay, okay, something just funny now. I created this character who's, I think he's kind of my alter ego. His name is Ranjan Mazumdar.
I know he's wearing a monkey cap.
He's wearing a monkey cap. He's the inventor of the monkey cap.
Oh,
And he travels around in these contraptions he makes for himself. And he travels in time, he travels in space, and he's, in this particular story, he's wearing his, I don't know if you realize that, he's wearing a Tintin outfit. But he changes from story to story, but in this case, it doesn't have much text. I'll just read out the first paragraph. It says, Prabhat Ranjan Mazumdar, the noted Bengali explorer and scientist and alleged genius behind the invention of the monkey cap, once passed through the fabled city of Shonamati. And the last friend says, each of these stories have a moral. Mazumdar has lots of morals. He derives morals from his adventures. So this one says, Mazumdar Moshai's moral number 325, art saves those it seduces. Thank you.
You have seen this one?
no. But will you need the mic? I beg you, Orijit. I beg you, the mic.
Just leave it in case I
Yeah, alright. So I'll put it down so it doesn't bother anyone. Just give me.
You never said anything
I have experiments.
Okay, you want to right context. Okay. So here I am with two people I greatly admire. And how lovely that is. I'm going to start with Orijit. Orijit, very clearly your first work is a work of activism. It's about Andolan. But where did that start? Where did that urge come from? Because I know you said you're drawing from the age of 12, you're reading comics, you fell into this world and you wanted to recreate that. But where did the activism urge come? Did it come from a sense of outrage? Did it come from a particular incident?
I think, in a sense, I think I read the biography of Che Guevara, and I said I want to be like this guy, and that's how I started. So yes, and after that I started. I think really that book, I must have been whatever 15 or 14 or something, 16. It was by a Russian author, and it was really just about glorifying Che or whatever. But the persona of Che kind of really, and it struck me that that this is really about living life with to live life according to your own values. You have to be able to kind of understand that in a larger context. That you can't isolate yourself and say that I'm living my life or my values. I think it connects with many other things. I was also very inspired by the music of Bob Dylan, for example, who's talking about ideas which So it kind of connected for me at that level that as an artist, you can sometimes you might what you might do in physical terms. As an artist, you have this amazing. Because I realized, look, I mean, Dylan is somewhere in some world which is far away, another planet, and I'm one guy in Hyderabad, and I can be so moved by his music, and can change my life. Then the power of art and music is such that it can transcend a lot of barriers, and I think that's what really people like that, and they kind of inspire me to use my abilities as an artist to really address things that I felt strongly about or that moved me. And yeah, that's. I studied in design school where, as a designer, you're supposed to do what your client tells you. Your client gives you a brief, and you use your abilities to respond to that brief and come up with. And I always thought that this is not, this is not good enough. As a designer, you just can't. Supposing, my client is Adolf Hitler and he says, make posters to get people to go and kill more Jews. Am I going to do it because I'm a professional designer? I mean, I'm taking an extreme example, but I felt that as a designer or whatever, as a creative person, you just can't put yourself aside and just be a practitioner of your form. There is something more to you as a complete artist, and all that has to come together in your work. So that's, I think.
So your idea of an artist is obviously someone who engages with the world that he's in very strongly. But that runs so contrary to your other classic idea of what an artist is, who does art for art's sake and lives in an ivory tower. We've never gotten to that.
No, I think that's kind of a very. I think that idea is a product of, let's say, the modernist movement in Europe, which glorified the idea of the individual genius, because it also suits, let's say, a certain consumer or capitalist setup where art needs to be bought and sold as a commodity. So the person who pays a lot of money for art has to feel that this guy is something incredible and amazing, that I'm paying so much money for it, and that I myself am incapable as the common thing of drawing a straight line. Hence, I can't be an artist. I'm just a buyer of art. I'm just a consumer of art, and I think again in the why I featured Mangu Gayan, the storyteller in the Narmada comic, is that when I was living traveling in those villages, meeting people, being part of their community, that creation myth is usually told by, there is one guy. There is the person who is assigned to the role of telling that story. He can tell that story the best, and he can sing it the best, and everybody is moved when he performs, everybody gathers to listen to it. But that does not mean that his audience does not know how to sing and play that instrument themselves. In fact, they all do it. But the fact that they are themselves, they can express their artistic selves, makes them greater appreciators of the great artists, because they know what it takes to be that. And so it's not a separation in that sense. It's just that it's an appreciation of a fellow artist, somebody who's so good at that you want to hear it only from him. And I think that's to me, that's the role of. I don't like the idea of this artist genius who's completely different from the rest.
I'm going to ask Amruta what's her definition. How did you come by your idea of what an artist should be and how they should live in the world?
I think it actually came about as a series of negations. Like, I don't want to be this, don't want to be this, don't want to be this, and that kind of eventually leads you to be a certain thing. Like, I studied advertising related art, and I definitely did not want to be in an ad agency. So that was like a step in a certain direction. In art school also, I knew what was deeply repugnant to me. Before I knew what was deeply attractive to me, I knew what was like, people would take gloves and birds that they found on the street and put them in plexiglass, and that was their exhibit for their annual show, which has its...
We get to see a lot of that.
I don't want to take pot shots of people that entertain, like that has its role too, but that was not my thing. I was not intrigued enough by that, or it didn't appeal to me either. Or there's a lot of one witty thing, like I got a witty idea, I turned it into installation, I put a tube light behind, and like a lot of people think I'm the coolest thing on the planet. You know, like this sort of thing you see so much in art school that if you know you are lucky enough not to be celebrated on account of those things, then you realize that there's something about it that is you're conning folks. You know, and I mean, again, it was not my thing. Therefore, I knew I didn't want to be doing that either. Other thing that I realized is that as a lot of social, you know, I had not terrific social skills as a young person, so there was a need to be validated via the work, because that is really primarily my way of talking, and if I'm able to be articulate now, 3 years ago I was not. So once that validation is received to whatever degree, you need to then make a choice about whether you want to be the spectacle that you're calling people feast upon me, or whether there's something more that you want to do as a person living there who has got half a brain. So therefore it was that not this, not this, not this, and therefore something else, which was perhaps serving some role.
And while Orijit told the story of a river, you told the river of stories. I mean, you know, again, it's always said that every artist in India has to encounter the Mahabharata, wants to be able to define themselves. How did that whole process of traveling to the Mahabharata change you?
My God, thank God you didn't ask me why I chose this, but I don't know why I did choose to tell the story of the epic, but having decided that it was not a cold call and I was just not trying to do my number on it, like I don't have a number on it, I don't have a feminist take on it, I'm not interested in that. I don't want to pull one character out of context from these constellation and make a Disney Arjun out of it, you know what I mean? That said, if you're doing the organic ontology number of viewing it from your body, then you realize that you need to pull up your own socks in many ways before you're capable of telling the story. So therefore, I mean, you probably need to ask the people around me, but I just know that I'm a slightly sweeter person than when I started, and hopefully that's an indication that something went right. I mean, I'm serious, I'm not being cute, so hopefully that's a sign that something was right.
Orijit's second book, when he said the title of the book, I was like, yes, Goa will connect with this. He did a book called Trash. Trash. You want to talk to us a little bit about it? It's about trash.
Yeah, the first thing I have to say is that I met my co-author just 5 minutes ago after many years of sitting right there, Anushka. That's written by Anushka and Geeta Wolf, and I collaborate with them in creating the artworks and sub-stories within that. It's about the lives of rag picker children. The story weaves around Velu, this little boy, migrant boy who comes into Madras and starts being a rag picker and becomes part of a small group of rag picker children making a living. The story goes through the ups and downs of his life and his little triumphs and tragedies. But in the course of that telling, it looks at so many issues about the politics of trash, about the actual management of trash, about the caste system, about how trash is dealt with in the West versus trash dealt with here. So it's a very fascinating book, and it kind of again takes something that's all around us in life, in our lives around us, which we, especially the privileged, the educated young people, are completely. I mean, it's about the invisible people who live all around us, and I think that idea of our dirt, yes, yes, and while this is a microcosm at a global level, you'd say that happens between nations, where you have these larger markets which are dumping their trash onto the smaller ones who are dealing with that or recycling it or whatever. So in that sense, I think it kind of, that story idea appealed to me immensely, and when Geeta asked me to come on and work on that project, I said yes. And again, it was about traveling to that space, being with those children, walking the streets of Madras at night, because it's very fascinating, and I want to, and this is actually in '97, and I really want to get a sense, I want to find a visual expression for this. I didn't want it to stay, I mean the fact that we have these little, the story carried on, and there were these little kind of boxes or kind of interjections where say, depending on where it was picking up threads from the story itself, there would be little information about, say, what happens, how do the police deal with runaway kids, or how does how is what is the how do kids kind of where do they live, what kind of how much they get paid a day, and what kind of work do they do. So there are these little interjections. So I introduced a character which is not there in the textual story. He's only there in the visual story, which is a little dog who, in the very first frame, we see the young boy Velu, and he's lonely and dejected. He's just landed in the Madras station and he's sleeping on a bench. And there's this little dog that comes up to him and starts sniffing him, and they become friends. And then throughout the book, you see him visually as a character, and he enters into those little boxes of those interjections, and he talks about all these issues. So to me, this kind of a link between fiction and fact is just like another thing, what you call fact. To me, that I like working in that space, which kind of grays that zone, that separation we have in our minds, that this is real, that's not real, this is fact, this is fiction. And so, yeah, that's how the project happened, and it was really exciting. Nice project.
I don't know whether you noticed this fact, but all the debris from the Twin Towers actually ended up in a landfill outside Hyderabad.
Is it?
It did.
Oh,
Yes. When you talk about other nations dumping their trash elsewhere, it's actually happened here. And your third book was your sort of comics which were based on HIV in Manipur. I found that fascinating, especially because the project it involved your local artists drawing, which is so important to let people tell their stories themselves. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Okay, what I wanted to say, I forgot about trash, is that so I was looking for a visual form to express this kind of overlay of so-called fact and fiction, of objectivity and subjectivity, and obviously this is in the days before Photoshop and all that. So I started working with taking photographs of spaces. So I wanted to bring out this sense of that physicality of that place, like Madras Central Station or a street in Gully in Madras or whatever. And I started collaging those backgrounds and then adding my painting on my fictional characters on top of that photographic background. And so in that sense, to me, every time I do a work, I kind of look for a form that would work with that thing, and I like exploring new styles of form every time. And so with the Manipur project, again, I traveled there, I spent time, I met a lot of people. I said, I can't do this all on my own, because this is the story of people's struggles with, at several levels. The whole idea of HIV/AIDS, or with any so-called disease, that's not just a bodily thing, it's a social, political, psychological, community thing, and especially so with HIV/AIDS. And so I started collecting stories. I did a series of workshops when I asked people to tell or write about, or even draw with like stick figures, their own stories, experiences as either caregivers to people living with it. Because at that point in Manipur, HIV was spreading rapidly in the young population mostly because of injecting drug users, and it would pass on from user to user because of share needles. And a huge number of young people were infected, and so I wanted to kind of tell the stories of how people are dealing with this, not just the people who have the infection, but their families, their parents, their children, their girlfriends, whatever. So I started asking people, or even caregivers, I mean professional caregivers, what does it feel like when we're dealing with so many young people coming in, nurses and in hospitals. And so then I realized that there was a comics culture also. Anyway, I mean, to me, comics is something I'm always looking for, and I discovered this kind of comics culture in Manipur, where a lot of young people make very little comics and self-distribute, make them, and they're mostly little, superhero tales, or some are westerns, or some are even fairly kind of, very nice, very, very, very interesting. So then I said, why do I need to do this on my own? I need to involve all these other young people who are doing stuff. And I started doing simultaneously story workshops as well as art workshops, and 3 or 4 very talented, very gifted artists sort of came out of these workshops, and I got them involved in this. And So we did a series of stories, which are a combination of stories from. So in a sense, there were stories by many people in the community, which we pieced together in different ways, and then they were illustrated by these boys, and I worked with them. And it's like a healthcare guide. I mean, the story characters, it's like in a way a bit like trash, because it takes off from points in the story to go deeper into the actual, like somebody in the story has repeated upset stomach because basically he's been infected. He doesn't know it, or he doesn't want to acknowledge it. Maybe he's afraid in his head that he is infected. Why is he getting it? But then, how to deal with an upset stomach? There are local remedies. There are other ways of dealing with it. And of course, there are certain medications or whatever. So then, there are a set of yellow pages after each of the stories, which kind of look into the physicality of it and how to deal with it. And the characters of the story sort of carry on into those yellow pages. So that form evolved as a result of what we were trying to do with that. So yeah, so I really enjoy actually exploring different forms and different means of creating comics or graphics of different kinds. I'll let it emerge from that situation or my response to that situation.
I find that really fascinating because what you just described, what you did with your money, so that you work as a community artist.
Yes.
You kind of wove the entire community into this project.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, Amruta, that you're not a community artist. You very clearly were like, well, I'm not an activist, I'm looking inward. But yet, when you showed us the work, there were so many issues up there that would actually, there was sedition, there was freedom of speech, there was greed, the toxic things we take. So you are, to some degree, standing up for various issues.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, that's the answer. Of course. Got my job easier.
Now, actually, I'll tell you why I use this medium. I could be volunteering for Greenpeace. I could be, should be also to some degree, putting myself physically out in the sun and doing stuff rather than just sitting in some ivory tower and doing comics. What I feel is, across the board, something that is missing in the realm of activism is gentleness, basically. I find there's a lot of, तुम कुछ गलत कर रहे हो, तुमने कूड़ा फेंका, shrill voices, and mainly तुमने ये कहाँ फेंका, you've come here and you've put trash over here. There's a lot of that, there's a lot of that angry kind of energy about activists by and large, which I find deeply frightening. Like basically, if you put it on sound mute, the expressions on the Greenpeace people and the expressions on the opposite side of the story, you can't tell who is what. They're all looking equally malignant, basically. And what I find really nice is it's this Krishna method of going about fixing stuff, Like you can use pretty colors so that folks that don't like reading manuals and things that are filled with political ideology, you've seduced them into listening, and yet it is in a way appealing, and you're telling, I mean, it's a clever way to do things I value beauty. I mean, that can be written off as being very superficial, but I find that it holds people in that other things can sometimes frighten off. So therefore, this medium is important to me, that it straddles these two things of telling a message cleverly to hold people, not making them feel like, oh, I'm such a pile of dirt, because in fact, actually, I didn't recycle my waste. So I think it's important to bring people in like that.
So you seduce them into it, and as we know, art saves most of it.
Absolutely. I love that line. I'm going to keep that one. I don't know where you got that from, but I'm going to keep that. So yeah.
Okay, the first time I ever saw Orijit's work actually was when he presented this mural that he done. And it was stunning, and I love the story and the place. Want to just tell us a little bit about it, Orijit? It's so good.
Show it.
You want to show it? Maybe you have that?
I have something.
I think just give everyone context of the mural as well, why it was done.
10 minutes left.
10 minutes left.
Okay. This is a mural that I was commissioned to do for the Virasat-e-Khalsa Museum in Anandpur side, and it took me about I had about 2 years on and off on it, and 1 year of really intense work. It's humongous. It was a very challenging space that was given to me. It was kind of oval surrounding. So my job was to create a mural that you walked into and you were surrounded by on all sides. And it was 20 meters high by 75 meters long. So 20 meters high is like, just as a reference, is about the height of a 4-story building. And I worked with, of course, a large team of people. The brief was that I should create a celebration of Punjab, the landscape of Punjab and the culture of Punjab. When I started researching, I realized that actually the landscape of Punjab without the people of Punjab is nothing very, I mean, it's not good enough to hold. I didn't see the point of wasting so much space on just representing the landscape. Fields and roads and mountains and whatever. So I started looking at miniature paintings from the Himachal, the Pahari paintings and other things, looking at the way they treated landscape and characters within the landscape. And I realized, yeah, this has to be a space which is full of the people of Punjab in the landscape of Punjab, but not a romanticized landscape, not a landscape of idealism, but the strange, paradoxical, weird, grimy, beautiful, funny, all the aspects of life and the spaces of Punjab. So that's what I ended up creating. It's hard to say. I think can I show you just quickly?
And a general interest magazine called First City. There's a little strip that appears in a newspaper which any odd person may be reading. So in a way, you are catching them unaware. So therefore, yes, he's not paying $300 to buy a thing about an issue that he doesn't support, and therefore he's not going to change his mind about it, right?
Yeah.
So in a sense, I choose to work in small format in media which is not a book medium for these issues, simply for this reason that it's kind of like guerrilla. You turn up there and then you catch people unaware and maybe something might register. But the other part Orijit will answer about
How effective is a graphic novel? How much
changing
knowledge
minds.
does it get and how effective is it
How
in
effective is
actually
anything in
minds?
changing people's minds if they're not inclined?
Don't you want to?
No, I'm saying a graphic novel because I feel a lot more effort goes into actually making a graphic novel on a certain thing. I mean, I could just go and do a demonstration and 100 people would at least pass by and listen to what I'm saying.
But like-minded.
Yeah, so
Can I just answer that question?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think there are two aspects to any kind of movement. One is awareness and one is getting people out on the road to actually stand up.
Yeah.
And I think what a graphic novel would do would be address awareness in areas that are not your traditional areas. So a young person is very likely to become a graphic novel, and so awareness is coming to people who would normally not care about that issue. This would not be on their radar at all. You know, young urbanites, where do we care? But a graphic novel reaches out to a completely different kind of audience. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Also, I think whether it's a graphic novel or film or your question actually relates to art as a whole.
yeah.
And I think, as I was saying, I can say from my experience that listening to Bob Dylan, who sang in New York in some other land and time and place which I had no connection with, but listening to his songs actually shaped my worldview. Has changed my entire life. I don't think you can discount the power of art to do that. The power of art to actually change people's lives from within, to make a permanent change, not a change that right now you say, ye to theek hai, he's saying the right thing and let's agree with him. That's a temporary thing, but a change of a much deeper kind is what art can do.
I have one more thing to add to that. Amruta did a book, a graphic format book called Toxic World. Okay, one thing which a graphic novel gives you is rigor. Basically, I want to know more about this issue. It gives me that. I mean, Toxic World gives me a checklist of stuff that I have no other access to for an India context. How to address the issue of how to consume, how to live in a way that is sustainable or less damaging. So it also gives you the rigor. So it may not be ideologically telling me something I don't know, but it gives me that much more information in a medium that is accessible.
I'll just say one last thing for that. How effective is art? Orijit did a poster, the Free Vinayak poster, which went on to have a life of its own, which became part of an entire movement. And he told me that one of his most moving things that he saw was a photo of thousands and thousands of Adivasi people carrying the Vinayak poster. And well, we know how that story went. Orijit, you want to present?
No.
We're just the visuals.
Orijit, you said that you were moved by Bob Dylan,
Yeah.
his songs.
Yeah.
But did you want to be a singer or something? Rather than be a...
No, even when I sang in the bathroom, I realized I couldn't do it. So that's why.
But you know, Bob Dylan sings like a bathroom singer.
That's probably why he appealed to me, but I was not even as good as him.
That's your form versus content argument. Content is so powerful, it's not how you say it. So. Any other questions? Okay, we have 2 minutes. One last question, anybody?
How long you took to do this?
This I worked, as I said, with a team of people. So it was about 1.5 years in the conception of it, in terms of planning, designing, sketching, researching, and a year of very intense work with my entire team.
Non-stop?
Yeah, virtually non-stop.
We have one question there. So
Okay,
two questions.
it's not just a question, it's also a comment, and I'm just talking about how in this room itself the high energy points are when everybody's laughing, right? So I'm also talking about how graphic novels are often, people use it synonymously with comic books and comic and comedy. It's just funny and really attracts a lot of people.
Yeah.
Why doesn't social activism have any humor in it? And in that context, why don't you release your film?
Yes,
See,
why not?
social activism is so dry, so boring.
Self-righteous.
We try our best. I mean, we did a picnic on the beach to protest against the cigar. We
But
did
that's-
try.
yeah.
Speaking from the activist side.
Yeah. No, I think not. I don't think it's always like that. I mean, have you been to a performance by someone like Gaddar, for example? It's high energy, high voltage, and he's talking really kind of very basic fundamental stuff, and also fearless. People join in, they dance, they laugh. I think that is the power of art, to move you beyond what you are, your time, your place, and take you to another space.
And I remember when during the company agitation in Goa, I used to do these cartoons, and I remember very vividly, I've got cuttings, and people used to carry my cartoons, as a sign of protest.
Yes. Yeah. So.
We have
Also,
one
I
last
think
question
we
here.
did-
1 sec. Sorry, I'll come.
Yeah, the
Sir.
question has already been asked, and I'm glad that you answered. But I still do feel that because you have that terrific character who invented the monkey cat. And when you introduce something like that, I felt, I mean, this is a very personal reaction, that even in your activism, we're talking about an order of managing to get to the objective much faster and much more forceful. This is a personal opinion. I don't know what you're totally feeling about it.
You mean in activism, which is in some other form?
No.
Sorry, I didn't get your question.
Just kind of injecting a character or several characters who bring the point home extremely powerfully, but at the same time have a lot of
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, like she said about humor.
Yeah, that's why I said the question would be asked. I just thought I would bring in monkey cat.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, and humor really works like that. When you can make a connection between two things which were previously unconnected, I think humor relies on that. It's a kind of a little brief moment of enlightenment when you suddenly see some kind of a connection. That's why you laugh, I think.
And also you're with the person and not kind of looking down and
laughing at.
I'm reminded of that Vinayak Sen poster we've done with democracy से नींद नहीं आती सर में दर्द होता है आज ही मिलिए डॉक्टर विनायक से.
You have to know those Hakim like Pachi, and the address आज ही मिलिए डॉक्टर विनायक से रायपुर
jail.
Okay, I think we'll wrap up with that since we're actually on time.
Thank you so much for picking us over glamour. Thank you for being here.